Well, first of all, um, uh, there are many, many Muslims in the world who are deeply committed to a liberative view of the world and of humankind. But there is also this idea amongst many people in the West that to be a progressive Muslim means to be on the side of Western values and Western civilization. When the word progressive is used in leftist discourse, then it means challenging power, challenging the status quo, challenging hegemony, challenging the idea of hierarchies. When it comes to Muslims, the word progressive is used. How do you fit in with the dominant values of society? So I often avoid the word progressive in a Western context when attached to Islam. In a political context, I'm happy to embrace the word progressive. In a religious context, I run away from it. Because in a religious context, it implies a Muslim that plays dead, a Muslim that wants to say Islam has nothing to say to the world. I will fit in. I will fit in. And liberation theology moves from two very important premises. The one is to understand your religion and your faith from the angle of the margins and the marginalized, but also from a second idea, and that is that not a single prophet, not a single prophet of God ever came into the world and asked, how do I fit in with dominant society? And so there is this idea of Muslims as troublemakers. I'm sorry. I rejoice in the idea of Muslims as troublemakers. Throughout the history of humankind, every single prophet was a troublemaker. Prophets do not come in and ask, give me a place at the table of civilization. Give me a place at the table of the elite, of the powerful, of... No, no, no. Prophets come and they turn the tables upside down, quite literally, as Jesus Christ had done in the Bible. And so this is the first thing that I want to say. And I know that this is worrying. But many, many progressive people throughout the world, we've come to think of our fundamental contradiction as being one with Muslims and Muslim fundamentalism. My fundamental contradiction is not with Muslims and Muslim fundamentalism. My fundamental contradiction is one with power and hegemony, invasions, occupations, and the exploitation of people. You know, many, many years ago, and I'm slightly ashamed about this, but many, many years ago, I was still a teenager at high school, and we were a part of the Black consciousness movement. I don't sing very well, but I will do it on camera. We went around our schools and around our stadiums singing, arson, rape and bloody murder, arson, rape and bloody murder, arson, rape and bloody murder, when the Black Revolution comes. That's horrific. It's racist. It's misogynistic. It's inhuman. You don't do this. We did it. Okay? Were we the problem? No. Apartheid was still the problem. our response to apartheid was deeply problematic. Our response to apartheid was inhuman. It was chauvinistic. It was disgusting. Were we the problem? No, we were not the problem. Our responses were problematic. Apartheid was still the problem. And so, Muslim radicalism, the problem in the ghettos of France, the problems in the Middle East, the problems of people in their hundreds, in their thousands fleeing to the battlefields of Syria and Iraq, deeply, deeply problematic, deeply troubling. Is that the problem? No. These are flawed and sickening reactions to a problem. The question is whether Western society is prepared to ask hard questions about itself, about its military industrial complex, about its economic systems that is founded on exploitation, invasions, and occupations. Where do these weapons come from? Even these ISIS weapons. Muslim countries don't have weapons manufacturing industries. And so, for me, the problem, and for many, many people in Europe, they know it, they just don't want to acknowledge it, is that they want to have their cake and eat it. They want to make money and have wealthy economies based on the exploitation of people in the two-third world, on the weapons industry, on unjust economic relationships on the one hand. And on the other hand, they also want to have peace in their own societies. You cannot have your cake and eat it. These are your chickens coming home to roost. Now, of course, I do have a fundamental problem with these problematic responses to hegemony and power and so on that is so deeply wedded in the Western conscious. And this is that often these people engage in, whether you call them fundamentalists or Muslim radicals and so on, their vision of the world is an exclusivist vision. It is not a vision of freedom. It is not a liberatory vision. Their vision of the world is every bit as ugly. And so I understand that it is a reaction to imperialism and occupation and colonialism, but at the same time, it isn't a vision that I share in. And so as a liberation theologian, I am concerned about understanding my faith from the margins, identifying with the margins. And that is why in a situation like France, it is important, I think, for Muslims to fight for their issues, but to understand that their issues are issues connected to larger society, that they're not the only ones who are being exploited, that Western civilization or Western powers are not waging a war against Islam. They're waging a war against Muslims because Muslims are offering some resistance to them. But the war is largely against the poor, against the marginalized. They do the same thing in Latin America. They do the same thing in the Philippines. They do the same things in every part of the world where they can get the gap. And so Muslims must learn to make common cause with others and not simply embrace the idea that we are the only victims in all of this. Victimhood is a terrible thing. We have seen what victimhood has done to the Jewish people, turned them, on the whole, into small, inward-looking, ugly little balls wrapped up in themselves. Muslims risk doing the same kind of thing. And so prophetic religion is something that speaks the truth to power, speaks the truth to power inside Muslim structures, looking at how Muslims treat our own minorities inside countries where we are in control, Pakistan, for example, and how Pakistan deals with Christians inside Muslim society, and how we deal with women. Prophetic religion is an attitude, is an approach to religion that looks at all the marginalized across the board and doesn't seek to establish one religious system over another in the same way that we see is being done in the name of Western civilization. If there is one word that you can equate with Christianity, then it is normally love, and Christ as the personification of love, Christ as the figure that gave his life that humankind in Christology, in the words of Christology, may be saved. If there is one word with which you may characterize Islam quite correctly, and that is justice, that the whole idea that God had created the world in truth, وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ وَلِتُجْزَى كُلَّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. The idea that God has created the heavens and the earth in truth, and that every soul may earn its just reward, and that it not be oppressed. So this idea of resistance to oppression, but also very significant, and the Quran is very clear about this, that our responsibility is to rise as witness bearers for God in the question of justice. But with a very important caveat, وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ, though this may be against yourself. And so it's not justice for the tribe, justice for Muslims, even though this may be against yourselves. And so the Quranic test of justice is not whether you rise and stand up to defend your own rights. That all of us do, that must come to us. It is great for us to do this. But the Quranic test of a commitment to justice is whether you can rise up as a witness bearer for God in the question of justice, though this may be against yourself. And so, in the context of local Muslims, how do I oppose dominant ideas of hegemony, identify with the Palestinians, identify with other immigrant groups in the ghettos? How do I do that? The pharaoh, the external pharaoh. And at the same time, how do you deal with the internal pharaoh? How do I deal with my maleness in relation to women? Because all of us have the capacity to both be oppressed and also to become oppressors. Oppression isn't the prerogative of white people. Oppression isn't the prerogative of Western civilization. Every single Hannah Arendt speaks about the banality of evil. You know, it's like just weird that we consign evil to the Nazis. We consign evil. No. Each one of us are simultaneously in the position of having control over others and being controlled by others. And so for me, the Islamic idea of كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم, to rise as a witness bearer for God in the question of justice, though this may be against yourself. This for me is the most important theological idea that I would offer to young people: to rebel, to speak up, but to speak up not in the narrow sense of just standing up for yourself, but to find larger causes all the time and seek out other margins of society to identify with, to collaborate with. And this is ultimately what is at the heart of what makes us humans, to be in solidarity with each other. And this is an idea fundamentally at odds with the capitalist idea that human beings are destined to be in competition with others. The religious conception of human beings, it's one of people in solidarity with others, the humano. Human beings caring about each other, human beings constantly in a state of returning to God. And so, yes, there is a clash of civilizations, and it's a clash of civilizations that I'm happy to be a part of. On the one hand, the conception of the human being as a commodity, and the earth as real estate, the earth as property, human being as Homo economicus, just an economic animal that must be exploited on the one hand, and on the other hand, the idea that human beings are sacred, connected to a larger ecosystem, engage in a larger journeying with each other, in solidarity with each other, moving as civilization moves on, as life moves on, in a greater journey towards a transcendence.